begin the story, we have to go back to 1978. Some of you weren't born yet. Some of you were in our schools as students at that time, while others of us had more hair and a slimmer waistline. And I'm in that crowd. In 1978, the Washington State Supreme Court, in the Dorn decision, required the state legislature to fully fund basic education as its highest priority with dependable and regular taxes. 10 years later, that definition of basic education was expanded by Judge Dorn to include special education as a basic right of students. In 1993, the Washington State Legislature passed the Education Reform Act, creating performance-based standards and the WASL. What they didn't do, what they didn't do was restructure any of the education funding system to support those changes. Not a single change was made to our funding system. In 2001, we saw the passage of Initiative 728 to reduce our class sizes, which has since been killed by the legislature. In 2001, we also saw the passage of No Child Left Behind, which means every teacher left behind. In 2004, the Washington Association of School Administrators published their school funding studies showing the growing problems with school funding, a study that was basically ignored. In 2005, Washington Learns was commissioned by then Governor Gregoire to study the education system and try and figure out improvements. That exact same year, an original 11 plaintiffs came together to form the Network for Excellence in Washington Schools, known as NEWS. They took it upon themselves to file suit against the state of Washington for their failure to meet the paramount duty of Article 9 of the state constitution. The lawsuit was filed in January 2007 and has become known as McCleary. The trial was held in 2009. In February 2010, Judge Ehrlich issued his ruling that NEWS had proven their case and that the state was violating the constitutional rights of the children that live in our state. In June of 2011, the state tried to appeal the case and lost. In 2012, the state Supreme Court ruled unanimously that the state of Washington is violating the constitutional paramount duty to amply fund our K-12 public education system by upholding Judge Ehrlich's ruling in 2010. The court then took a very unusual step in retaining jurisdiction so that they could monitor the progress of the legislative branch to see that they were following through because they had broken so many promises in the past. And then we come to this last fall, when the state Supreme Court issued contempt citations against the Washington State Legislature. The court gave the legislature one last chance, this one, right now, this legislative session, to prove that they have a plan to fully fund basic education by 2018. There are those who question why we are here today. They wonder why we haven't done other things to bring about change. Well, what have we done? During that entire time period that I just sketched for you, from 1978 to the present day, we've done the following. We have sent literally hundreds of thousands of emails, letters, made hundreds of thousands of phone calls to the state legislature. We've written editorials. So many times I've lost count. We've lobbied legislators at town hall meetings. We've gone to Olympia. We've lobbied them when they visited our schools. We've pressed them to do the right thing. We've marched numerous times in Olympia. Numerous. The last time, just a couple of weeks ago, 4,000 educators came to Olympia to march. That was on a Saturday. Sunday was supposed to be the last day of the regular session. We hoped to have a day, a march, a rally, and then to press our legislators to do the right thing. And what did some legislators do? Not the one standing behind me. They left town. They adjourned early so that they could then call a special session that would start today. Why they couldn't stay and hear from us on Saturday? Members of our community have asked, why don't you do things on the weekend? Why haven't you tried other things? We've tried everything, and that's why we're here today. We've held teach-ins. We've used informational pickets. We've even taxed ourselves. As WA members, you have footed the bill, the largest economic bill for the news lawsuit. You taxed yourselves not once, but twice to pay for the lawsuit and to pay for the ongoing monitoring and further litigation to that lawsuit. We've passed initiatives to lower class sizes, require the state to pay a COLA. All have been suspended and gotten rid of. The one thing that we did during that time that is still holding is you launched a campaign to make it so that we could pass our school bonds with just a simple majority. And we got that through, and it holds. Currently, out of our local levy money in North Shore, we spend over $20 million per year in local levy money to backfill what the state does not pay for basic education. I want you to imagine the educational program enhancements we could have in North Shore for our students if we had $20 million more every year. This is why we're here today, to fix this funding problem. We have to have new revenue. The legislature has to understand we need new revenue. We have one of the most regressive tax systems in the entire country. We need new revenue that is fair, that does not place the tax burden on the 99%, on the middle class, but instead starts to tax those at the upper income bracket at the levels they should be taxed to pay their fair share. Most importantly, we cannot, in our quest for full funding for basic education, we cannot forget the social net that protects the students we serve. They can't balance the education budget by then turning around and cutting social services, cutting money for our prisons. You cannot do that. So when should the legislature fund education? It's beautiful. Our next speaker is a senior from Bothell High School. Welcome, Senior Madison Snowden.
Thank you. You guys look amazing out there, just all covered in red. I was driving up and I was like, well, I'm just gonna follow the sea of red because that's obviously where I'm going. My name's Maddie. I'm a senior at Bothell High School, but I was in 3rd grade when it happened. Testing was coming up at my school and the teachers were doing everything they could to help us prepare. My mom tells me I came home each and every day in tears. Teachers were so stressed about making sure that we did well despite the limited resources they had. When the exam came to my desk, I remember feeling like I could hardly breathe. I was in 3rd grade when I had my first anxiety attack, and it wasn't the last. I'm not the only one with a story like this. Countless kids throughout the halls of our schools walk around every day, one test away from a panic attack. Why is this normal? When did it become the average state of mind? Where was I when testing became the answer to the problem? If we reduce testing, that sentence doesn't have to be a bookmark in everyone's life. The truth is, I probably wouldn't have had an anxiety attack at 9 years old if my class had been a little smaller. That year, there were 32 of us crammed into a classroom, and the teachers simply didn't have the time or the resources to give us each the individual attention we needed or deserved. And classroom sizes have gotten worse. I stopped taking French this year because I didn't want to continue sharing a desk with another student. And I loved French. How irritating is that? The solution to the problem seems so simple, but people are trying to make it so complicated. Smaller class sizes aren't just for students, but for teachers as well. Currently, teachers go overworked and underappreciated too often. The simple thank you carries so much weight when it comes from a student who's struggling. Teachers can give those students, the ones who are slipping, the ones who are one test away from an anxiety attack, the ones that you and I were probably at some point, the attention that they deserve. I was in 3rd grade when I had my first anxiety attack, but I didn't have to be. And no one else should have that sentence in their life story. If we reduce testing and create smaller class sizes, we can wipe out that phrase for a whole new generation of kids. Thank you.
Let's hear it for Madison. Our next speaker is a first-year teacher. From North Shore Junior High, Kelsey Phillips, who will talk about compensation and the challenges that new teachers face.
Hello, fellow teachers, families, friends, students. Thank you so much for being here to support us today. It means a whole lot. So I'd like to mention, as a first-year teacher, I'm going to be shedding some light on what it's like to come into the world of education at such a tumultuous time. I graduated from Washington State University College of Education in 2013. Thank you. And during my time there, we spent a little bit of time talking about financial topics, but mainly just theory and practices, which is what we should spend our time on. So coming into a position at 2 different schools in the district, I was really overwhelmed with the large class sizes, 35 at its highest, just under 30 at its lowest. It was really, really intense, and that left hardly any free time for anything. On top of the monetary worries of being a recent graduate, it was just really, really stressful. When a third of my paycheck goes to rent, another third goes to my student loans, it doesn't really leave a whole lot of expenses for day-to-day getting by. Thank you. Day-to-day getting by, yeah. And so, I think I have about $21,000 of student loans. Not feeling confident in my ability to pay that back anytime soon is another stress that adds on to everything else that we go through as teachers. A lack of costing living adjustment on top of that also just isn't helpful. Seeing my peers flourish financially in positions where they spend less face time with people, less deeper level thinking, less planning, basically less of everything that we do on a daily basis, hour by hour, always changing it. It's pretty discouraging. And, spending a couple hours on the phone, getting paid thousands of dollars in commission on top of an already lucrative salary is just a little discouraging for us, and it makes me question, honestly, why I joined this field. Why did we join it? Well, obviously, as teachers, we have a strong passion for what we do. Why we could say the paycheck doesn't necessarily play a huge factor because it is so rewarding for the soul. I don't think my landlord or the good people of Pullman will accept that for me. Maybe not. Maybe not. After talking with some current colleagues who are about to graduate from the education program, it's super clear that the amount of people interested in the education field for my generation is decreasing at a rapid rate, and mainly from the financial stresses that it accumulates. A current friend of mine literally heard from a teacher to run from the hills rather than to accept a teaching job in this climate, which just isn't okay. It's just not okay. A fellow educator explained it to me like this. After the first few years, you get really comfortable with your curriculum, you feel good about your classroom management, and that should be fine. You should be good to go. But the continued adding to children to your class sizes on top of that low pay and just the lack of things that we get for what we do makes it hard to want to keep up with this for a full-time career. The exciting things that first got you into the profession, made you love your job, made you love coming into work every day, it just isn't necessarily enough to keep it afloat for the long term. Very disheartening to hear, but it's important for us to reflect on the way that our state teaches teaching all the time. treats new teachers as a factor in the continued growth of our field with my generation, it's really important for us to be able to reflect on that. Being nearly halfway down the country's list in the salary scale and the lowest in accumulated pay for West Coast states simply is not reflective of the amount of pride that we Washingtonians take in our status in the education world. We are people who are motivated, progressive in our methods, and very reflective on the work we do. So why don't our salaries reflect that? Teaching can be a very stressful and frustrating experience, and those large class numbers only work to add to that stress. Although there were many contributing factors, low pay and those large class sizes were two main reasons why I personally will not be returning to the teaching field next year. I would hate to see the same sentiment among current and future teachers from my generation. I love teaching, but just not at the expense of my personal, physical, and financial health. So it's time. It's really time. It's time for teachers to get the respect and salary that they deserve, for us to be able to work with smaller class sizes and see students grow and flourish in responsive schools rather than go unnoticed in classrooms that are just bursting at the seams. We need to have positive changes to our educational community, and we need those changes now. Thank you.